Redditors who were pronounced dead. What did you go through? I was in a motorbike accident in 2013. It eventually resulted in internal bleeding from damage to my spleen and liver, plus more. I was pretty messed up. Just the spleen was really bleeding though. I ended up with 13 units added to me over multiple transfusions. I had a few small incision surgeries to try to stop the bleeding before they really opened me up. The morning I was supposed to have a big surgery, I was waiting in the ICU. I am told that I coded one morning. Effectively, I was on the edge of death and my heart stopped. It was definitely not so far as to be pronounced dead, but I guess it was closer than most people prefer. Between physical trauma, massive blood loss, and massive painkillers, my memory of the time in the ICU is spotty at best. I have absolutely no memory of coding. It isn't very exciting from my perspective. But my brother says it was pretty intense for everyone else in the room. Luckily, I have a totally normal life now. If I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt, all my scars are hidden and no one knows any different. In the pool, there are a lot of scars to see. Kids stare. It doesn't bother me. Thanks to all the medical staff out there that do so much to keep people like me alive. I don't remember anything from the whole day. It happened one afternoon. Only thing I remember is waking in the hospital 2 days later to a surprised nurse. Turns out they thought I was going to be in a coma. One of my best friends almost died giving birth to her daughter. She was bleeding out and the doctor and nurse had summoned the priest to perform last rites. She basically made a plea to God that if he let her live, she would make her life's mission to save other people on the way to emergency surgery. Says she blacked out and thought she was dead. She woke up with her mom and doctor standing by her bed, surprised she had survived. She felt she had been given a mission and went back to school to be a nurse. She eventually got a job as an ICU nurse on the code team. In short, when people are dying, it's her job to save them. Which she's done for more than 20 plus years now. I wasn't actually pronounced dead. I was in a coma on life support. I was drugged at a bar and overdosed on the drug. I don't really remember much, but I know I walked home from the bar and my sister said when I got there I immediately fell down and wasn't waking up. She rushed me to the hospital and said I wasn't breathing and my lips were blue when I got there. I was immediately put on machines and miraculously woke up about 24 hours later. The thing is, I have zero memory and it didn't feel like that long. It was like waking up from a nap when I did wake up, and I didn't understand what the deal was when my friend ran out of the room like she's awake. Get in here. To this day, my near death is a huge disappointment. I didn't have any dreams. I didn't get to see any dead relatives. I didn't meet God or any angels. Nor my spirit guide. It was just a $12 nap. I got hit by a car. I could still see with my eye that didn't have blood in it. I could hear all the commotion. I felt getting forced into my back and then CPR. I felt my first heartbeat and then blood flowing through my body, and at that point I felt all the pain, took a deep breath, and then everything went black. I've died once. I don't remember much about it except there was a nice, dark nothingness which I guess felt kind of cozy. But I also knew it was the end. So I'd better not. I don't know. I knew I wasn't supposed to go into the dark. Like I was in the dark. But I wasn't supposed to be enjoying it. Because if I embraced it too much I would die. I'm generally not that scared of death these days. It was kind of like falling asleep and kind of vaguely remembering a dream when you wake up. All I really have are feelings. Not a solid picture or an image or anything like that. I was around 5 years old when I almost internally bled to death from a bad virus. I experienced what I could only describe as maybe some weird limbo in between heaven. It's weird because I don't think I even had a concept of heaven at that point unless it's something I saw in a cartoon. I was transported to my grandparents' house except there was no walls. Everything was hanging on the walls like normal, but it was floating in midair. No one was home, but I remember just wandering around the house looking at everything floating. Then it switched to me at my elementary school. Again. There was no one around. Almost abandoned. Except I saw another girl around my same age. My memory is a bit foggy of what she told me, but I know she had passed away and I think she was trying to get to heaven. We ended up being in some beautiful area. Gorgeous hills with green grass and beautiful trees everywhere with blue skies. I was standing next to a tree and kept rubbing the leaves. As long as I kept rubbing the leaves I wouldn't pass away completely. I remember then being almost literally in the sky. There was a huge giant tree log that I wasn't allowed to pass unless I was ready to leave Earth. If I decided to go over it, I would basically be with God, although I don't remember thinking that word as a kid. It was just like you would be with some loving energy. I remember not wanting to cross because I didn't want to leave my parents yet. And that was it. I woke back up from falling unconscious suddenly as I was hemorrhaging. This is really hard to write. Sorry for the rant. After I had my baby, via emergency C-section, important in a minute, I hemorrhaged. There were a lot of questionable things that happened during labor that could have caused it. When it began happening it felt like my water was breaking along with absolutely terrible contractions. My stomach would cramp. Then I'd feel a gush. Some relief and lightheaded before it began again. Every time the weakness and lightheadedness got worse. I had a pretty big midwife doing abdominal massages on me. By that I mean imagine a woman who does CrossFit for fun. A woman who is close to 6 tall and is at least 200 pounds of muscle. Hindsight. She was the most important person for this specific job and I really lucked out having her. She was an absolute beast. I had a tiny OB elbow deep pulling clots out. My DF was standing there watching. Holding out baby that was just a few hours old. The nurses were trying to get more fours in me but due to blood loss, dehydration and me fighting like hell because I was getting some pretty intense CPR type pushing onto a fresh surgical wound. I fought them trying to do anything. Again. Hindsight, it wasn't the smartest thing. But I literally had no control. I remember them saying I wasn't going to make it. I remember passing out multiple times. I was in shock. I would go from freezing to sweating almost instantly. I was so thirsty. Before becoming pregnant I smoked weed a lot and never had cottonmouth this bad. I think my tongue was worse than sandpaper. What I remember the most was not having my DF there. They kicked him out of the room. Then needed to bring me to the OR. I remember almost throwing myself off the bed. The entire bed was able to go. I didn't need a stretcher. Smart design for a delivery ward, from the shock. But back to what I vividly remember the most. I didn't have the chance to tell him I loved him. I couldn't hold his hand or kiss him in the absolute scariest moment of my life. I knew I would die. I wanted my person holding me. I wanted to die in his arms and I was alone. I came to in the OR to the anesthesiologist talking about a central line. I got a nurse's attention and asked her to tell him I love him. She told me she would. I cried and begged for him but she said she couldn't get him again. I also couldn't remember at that point if I ever kissed my child. I saw him for a second. Said he was cute. Looked into his eyes and heard him cry. But I couldn't remember if I kissed him or told my baby I loved him. That's the last thing I remember. I woke up in the ICU. I was fucking exhausted. I was in such a daze and I didn't feel like my body was my own. I was so emotional but at the same time didn't feel anything. I remember crying but I get numb. I was honestly incredibly surprised to be awake. I was told my body was actively trying to die and if they had waited another 5 minutes, I would be. Apparently I did flatline but came back before being pronounced. I also had over 14 liters of blood pumped in. I was still severely anemic for 6 Mos. A frat brother was clinically dead 45 seconds. Overdosed on Xanax. The experience changed his life. He never used drugs again. He said he saw himself over the hospital bed and the nurses working. He said as he slowly floated through the roof a peaceful feeling better than any drug took over. He said you feel free of all worry and regret. He saw the white light allegedly and a few family members before they said it wasn't his time. He floated back to his body. He was never the same again and used to be atheist. Edit, I can't tell y'all what I believe for sure. Or if he really experienced it. The raw emotion and the hospital records confirm to me he experienced something or that he was at least dead. He has never lied to me and the effect on him was palpable. But both of us had our own issues at FSU. I also went overboard so now I don't enjoy lots of drugs. Used to be top party school in the nation so it was hard to focus on what's important. I was about 15. Climbed on top of the kitchen counters to grab something from the top cabinet. Slipped and fell head first on the marble floor. Next thing I knew I was walking in water barefoot. I look up to my upper right hand side and there's a bright light with a hand poking out making the come here gesture. I walk towards it. Meanwhile I realize the peaceful and relaxed state I'm feeling. Like the best deep sleep ever, and I say to myself, man, this is awesome, I never wanna wake up. Then all of a sudden a jolt and I wake up to my mom wailing her lungs out. Apparently I was stiff, cold with no heartbeat and managed to piss my pants. As an atheist that doesn't believe in heave, it's def something I think about often. My buddy had heart surgery last year that got complicated. To the point where it took about triple the time it was supposed to. He has spoken at length with me about the experience because it was so traumatic. He did require resuscitation from a full arrest mid-surgery. Which sadly, fortunately, he does not remember. What he does slightly remember is the 3 days of post-surgical psychosis, as the specific cocktail of sedation played poorly with his personal brain chemistry. For him it was a relentless stream of horrible hallucinations. Demons. Fighting monsters. Quicksand. Carnivorous hospital beds. Being swallowed by the orderlies who morphed into tentacle monsters. Pulling out his own Foley catheter while it was still inflated. All sorts of terrible, horrible memories he wished he could erase. So if he even remembered specifically the being dead portion of the program, it is unlikely that would even compare to the subsequent 3 days of his life. In order to not bias the answers, please comment also if you experienced nothing or were simply unconscious. Thanks for watching.